Yeah, Brad's,
We've
Brad's
got
with me. I was
nice
just
one.
saying, I've got three devices, and all three wouldn't get me into the room.
Hey, yeah, yeah.
They
It's
blocked you. They didn't want you out
Yeah,
there.
they didn't want me out there. They didn't want me. I was going to
Too
use.
much to say.
I had a really good analogy as well. I don't know if you have you guys seen that thing that's going around of that guy that got into the brown bear enclosure in a zoo somewhere in Europe.
yeah. I've seen that.
Did you
I've
see
heard of
that?
that. I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to use one of my best analogies and I couldn't fucking use it.
Oh
John,
well.
what is it?
It was against the Freeman thing.
Go on, what's the analogy then? Go on.
Well, the analogy was, I realised the other day, when you've got all these muppets that are coaching on the sideline, Brad, telling you. By the way, guys, sorry, I only heard a fraction of the live show. Did Brad tell you about the guy that's got £5,500 in Fabrice? We mentioned it the other night, didn't we? £5,500 in TFL congestion charge tickets.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
the interesting thing is with a guy with a brown bear, it's like having someone at the sidelines saying, "Go on, get into the enclosure. The bear's not going to do you any harm. You'll be absolutely fine." I've got them with a bear loads of times. Look at me, I'm fine.
Yeah. 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 I hear you. I
Yeah,
hear
and then the guy gets into the enclosure with the bear. I mean, that guy lost his arm, by the way.
you. Yeah. I know. I
He
mean,
lost an arm and a leg, yeah?
Sorry.
I said he lost an arm and a leg.
Well, I was going to say that the bloke who lost his ambulance lost his job, and I think that probably felt like an arm and a leg to
Exactly.
because I was talking to Dean about a guy who was he has an animal vet, and one borough in London doesn't let his ambulance go through the bus lanes, and he'd had correspondence with them about the fact that his ambulance was exempt, and they just set the bailiffs on him, sort of a chunk of the way through the process. They repossessed his ambulance, his wife's car, sold them both off, and billed him about 12 grand for the whole thing.
Jesus.
Yeah. And that's pretty brutal. Arm and a leg. You wouldn't want to jump in the bear with people who are as reasonable as that.
Exactly, and obviously this guy's a psychiatric patient. He lost part of his arm, but obviously he still survived. But now he hasn't got his arm from the elbow down, and it's very similar to a lot of these Freeman characters. Brad. I mean, the amount you've come across, and since I've been getting involved, and I've come across where you've got these people that are losing their livelihoods, are losing their jobs, are losing their cars, their homes. And there's still these characters on the sidelines saying, "Oh, don't worry, the brown bear's not going to do you any harm. It's all an illusion."
Yeah, and it's definitely one to be aware of, and that's why I think a good line in standard advice is, if even if you do go and see a solicitor because you have faith in that process, go and get some other advice from people who've done it and been through it. And have tried a few things to see what's the best remedy for your individual case. But I think as Brad was saying, just do something, don't do nothing.
Yeah. Always reminds me of a call that Bradley had with helping out someone who was trying to sell their property, and this Irish guy swooped in. And he wanted to, basically swindle the guy out of his property. And Brad, do you remember the conversation with you and Mr. Dunphy?
By the way, guys, if possible, because we couldn't get Dean on, if we run this call on for a little while, I might well release it as a bunker bonus segment. So if that's all right, if you guys don't use names that you're not happy to be out there, because I'd rather not edit. But yeah, that would be great, because maybe we could cover a couple of the things that we didn't get a chance to do in the bunker.
Oh, Fabrice, does that mean I can use my analogy then?
Well, you've already used your analogy,
Okay. Oh, it's recording now. Oh, okay. Great. I wanted to use it because, so Brad was talking to this guy and sort of saying, what are your intentions, etc., etc. And all this got. Sorry, Brad, I'm talking about you like.
No. You listen to the audio, so.
Yeah, I nearly crashed the car when I was listening to the call. It was so funny. And the guy's a multi-millionaire property developer. He turns large properties in HMOs, house and multiple occupancy. He has contracts with the local authorities. I won't say the guy's name, but he's. I think he said he was a Romany gypsy, because obviously he was talking about boxing, and the guy that was selling the house was an ex-boxer, so there was a little bit of synergy there. And this property developer said to Bradley, "What the F? Why the F are you involved in this? Are you a solicitor?" And Brad said, "No." He said, "I'm just assisting him and trying to give him the correct guidance." So he said, "You're not a solicitor?" And Brad said, "No." He said, "Why the F are you? Why the F are you involved anyway?" And Bradley said, we're an unregistered charity, we're trying to help out, blah, 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 blah. He said, "Well, can't you effing get the guy to speak to a solicitor, get some proper advice, instead of speaking to a muppet like you?" So, do you remember that bit, Brad?
Oh, man, he called me.
He called me
every name. He couldn't grasp the fact that I'm helping out a stranger.
Yeah, he couldn't get his head around it, and it didn't matter which way round you tried to fit it. This guy, it wasn't within his paradigm. And then he dropped into the conversation. "Well, look, either way, can you just get him to get proper legal advice?" And Brad said, "Well, why does he need legal advice when I'm giving him the correct guidance anyway?"
What I said is, why does he need a solicitor at the moment? All we want to do is settle terms. If we get the terms right, he'll get a solicitor.
Yeah.
And he was just so evasive and just like literally, it was so funny. I mean,
strictly speaking, I think, Brad, wouldn't that be against the Trade Union Discrimination Act? Just because you're not a member of the Bar Association, which is a representative trade body, i.e. a trade union, that's biased, because if you were a member of that trade union, the bloke would have been happy to deal with you, I guess. That's what I'm picking up.
Exactly, but the classic line was, though, Fabrice, this guy said, "Well, look, I can pass on my solicitor's details because my solicitor won't lie to him." And Brad said, "You're saying your solicitor doesn't lie?" "Oh, no, he's a solicitor. He's got a degree in law. They don't lie."
Fabrice is actually on one of the channels. I'm not too sure.
It's hilarious.
But you should listen to it. The torrent of abuse that I get over about 20 minutes. It is funny to know. You'd love it. I don't know what it's titled. Dean will probably be able to tell you. But
yeah, and I should imagine the funny thing was did the solicitor actually answer? I mean, I can imagine what your questions would be like in terms of disclosure. Did he actually answer any of your questions, or did he just choose to insult you with your lack of qualification, so-called?
That was pretty much it, yeah. It was pretty much just, I'm a CUNT and I'm thick and all this sort of stuff. He just couldn't grasp the fact that,
he must have called you a see you next Tuesday about a dozen times.
Yeah.
And apparently, Fabrice, I don't know if you was aware, and I only found out on this call, if you've got a law degree, you don't lie.
Well, yeah, I mean that'd be an interesting one to.
That's an interesting one. I mean,
to hold up, I don't think. I think they're human beings. I think human beings are capable of it.
I mean, I've got nothing against lawyers, but if a lawyer told me it was raining, I'd still look out the window.
Well,
just to be absolutely sure.
Well, I think, it's something that Bradley was mentioning a little earlier, is if you have people who care enough about your case to read through the paperwork and familiarise themselves with the paperwork, and you must be aware of this, Dean, because you've been working with the paperwork on a few cases, how important that is to be familiar. Because if you can do that, you can see if something isn't right and proper.
Exactly. I mean, as you well know, Fabrice, at the end of the day, if you're working as a partner in a law firm or you're working towards being a partner in a law firm, at the end of the day, it's about your billable hours, and you've got to post so many billable hours per week or per month, and you're always under that pressure to keep posting billable hours because it's a financial constraint on you, and obviously if your billable hours go below a certain level, then obviously, technically, you're going to get carpeted by one of the senior partners. So when you're actually reading through paperwork, how much are you going to skim, that I call skimming, or how much are you actually going to read and drill down on the issues? And, I'm not particularly intelligent. I've got a 60-watt body with a 5-watt head. But the 5 watts I do have, I try and use to the fullest extent. And when I read the paperwork, I do read it 2 or 3 times over to see if there's anything I can pick out of that particular, paragraph or comment or whatever. And I'm sure with these extremely bright legal people, with my tongue firmly in my cheek, they're going to miss these issues because they haven't got the ownership. Because at the end of the day, because of the billable hour scenario, they've got this cookie cutter approach to all their different clients, which is understandable, I guess, because of the financial constraints they're under.
An interesting way I found that dynamic can actually affect in practicality is I've had people come to me in the past with child issues in terms of they're no longer with the partner. There is a legal negotiation going on, and often they're the less wealthy of the partners, so they're starting to feel the financial drain of quite expensive solicitors' letters. So I'm able to, with them, construct paperwork so that they can be clear about exactly what is at stake. And sometimes we get letters back from the solicitors that are a reply, but they're completely non-responsive to the questions we've asked because they're automated letters. And when you reply to a solicitor saying, thank you very much for your leaflets and your information, but can you please answer the questions that I asked you? I think they start to go to the other partner. This is going to not just be a cheap childcare case here. This is going to actually cost a few quid. And it's at that point I'll say, but I would have said to the person that I'm working with, at some point you're going to look for terms with your partner because he's not going to want to keep going through the legal things. So they often put heads together and cut out the legal side of it and actually come to a resolution without being drained. Both sides, both solicitors getting rich off one either side. And when you actually ask them, can you tell me factually exactly what parental rights it is that you're seeking to acquire over this child? They're just like, oh no, man, this isn't a standard letter. And that can often then lead to, the parents resolving it whilst preserving as much of the family's resources as possible.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's a sort of a practical way in which, that dynamic can be shifted around, because I'm sure Brad gets this with the Crown Prosecution Service. Some cases they're quite happy to leave in limbo and do absolutely no work on, and then if they, they'll just try and steamroll them through court when they haven't actually done the proper investigation or compiled, complete enough evidence.
I mean, it's interesting you say that, Fabrice. From the silly stuff I've done is mainly traffic stuff. But when I've been in magistrates' court, you see that rabbit in the headlights look on the prosecutor that's furiously thumbing through paperwork. I mean, 9 times out of 10 they're absolutely winging it. And when you call them out on some of the when you call them out and you back them into a position where they've actually got to come out with stated facts of the case, I've actually had them fold.
Hey Dean, this is Jimmy here.
Hi Jimmy.
Yeah, man. Would you be able to just explain one, or just kind of recount one of the times that you can recall, actually bamboozling, some of these guys?
Yeah, I've had a prosecutor refer into a car with regards to a traffic situation, and I've let it go on. And I've let it go on to the point where I've made them realise it was actually a motorbike.
So So part of all this is the craft of the bamboozle, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's a craft. I mean, me and Brad have discussed this at length. With regards of, obviously it gets more refined. When you're in the High Court, the work that Brad does, because obviously it's more refined, it's more balanced, and it's more nuanced. But what I'd say to anybody, if you want to learn how to conduct yourself with regards of putting across a good position, and not, and learning the craft, you cannot go wrong with, if anyone goes onto YouTube and Googles a man called Jerry Spence. Now, Jerry Spence was renowned.
He's good, actually, yeah.
He's never lost a case, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah. Now, Jerry Spence achieved notoriety when he defended a lady called Imelda Marcos. Now, for those of us of a certain vintage, will know the Marcos name. Marcos was a dictator
of Philippines.
Yes, that's correct.
And she loved her shoes.
Exactly, and this is the lady of the shoes. Reputedly, up to 6,000 pairs of shoes while their people starved.
In an entire wing of her house, by all accounts, when the regime.
That's correct. That's correct. And Jerry Spence actually defended her and won. And Jerry Spence is a very interesting character, and
definitely read his book.
Yeah, exactly, Brad. Read his book, but there's a lot of stuff about him on YouTube, and what makes him very, very interesting is that Jerry Spence originally was a prosecutor, even though he found fame as being the best defence attorney in the world. And what happened was he had a road to Damascus moment where he represented an insurance company regarding a construction claim. Anyway, to cut a long story short, it was against a guy who was a one-man business, and he basically ruined the guy on behalf of the insurance company. Actually, lost his house, lost everything. And what happened was, at the end of the court case, Spence jumped in his car and went to the supermarket to get some groceries to go home. When he went into the supermarket, he walked into this chap that he just ruined. And chap walked up to him, and he put his hand out and he said, Mr. Spence, you've done a fantastic job. And he just said, no hard feelings. And Spence said, that was the time when I realised I couldn't be a prosecutor anymore. I realised that my life was all about putting in a defence. He said, I just couldn't live with myself for what I did to that man.
Yeah. I think that's sometimes there can be, and often it is when you can hit some of those ridiculous moments that it's almost like some of the most entrenched mindsets can get a little bit of I don't know, a breakdown in their cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of silly times in court and prosecutors being caught in the headlights.
Yeah.
At the end of Helen's case, the prosecutor, was.
I was reminded when you were talking about you watching them.
Helen, Fabrice, why are you there? Can I ask you a quick question? Because I've listened to you guys for a hell of a long time. Do you think in that speeding case, Helen?
Yeah.
Do you think things changed when she started calling you Mrs. Ansell? Was that the turning point?
No, I think it was. No, the turning point for us was the district judge putting an order on the prosecution to provide me with the evidence that I was asking for, and giving them 28 days to do it.
Oh yeah, sure.
So that was what did it. And but they were just crap, like you said. They were winging it the whole way. She was. They were in court faffing around trying to get hold of witnesses, and I'm watching it all happen knowing that the witnesses they're trying to get for the next part of the trial are the witnesses we've already dealt with. I let it go on for a certain amount of time, and then I just say, well, look, you're calling the wrong people anyway. I've already dealt with those witnesses. These are the witnesses you're supposed to be calling, and just sort of pointing out to the court and the prosecution what's going on, and in the end she just said to me on the last day, before the court, she just said, you got me on the back foot. And I
Boom.
said, yeah, but
Yeah.
and then she said, are you having just as much success with your council tax? And I said, well, it's not going quite as well as this at the moment.
Exactly.
and she said, well, if you've sorted it out, can you let me know?
When I heard that interview that you done with Mark Stevens at the time, to me it was quite poignant when you went from not someone to be ignored and be derided. I'm talking the prosecutor, the clerk, and then all of a sudden you then became, "Good morning, Mrs. Ansell."
Oh yeah, that morning. That's the one where she said you've got me on the back foot. Yeah,
Oh,
I've been
okay,
put in
okay.
They tried to put me in the dock. They put me at the back, and the prosecutor at
Yes.
the front. And that last day, they went, "Oh no!" I went to go where they put me before, and they went, "Oh no, come sit up the front." And I thought they were going to bring me tea and biscuits. They were so polite to me, and then they just gave the prosecutor a rollicking because they want to shout at somebody.
Yeah,
So as long as you can get them onto the prosecutor, you get them off you.
and the other thing was, I mean, I'd been virtually ignored throughout the whole proceedings, apart from when, they would decide to say to Helen, maybe you should get some, proper legal advice before you get yourself in a real, deep mess. But it's the last day. Good morning, Mrs. Ansell. Good morning, Mr. Bardsley. And I was like, oh my God, they know, they know I exist. They can actually see me. I was, thinking I had my Harry Potter handkerchief of invisibility on my head.
Okay, Fabrice, I've got something for you that will interest you. I got this the other day, something similar. But someone else has just sent me it now. I'll just read it out to you because it relates to court costs. The latest 11th of September 2015 release of the Sentencing Council Magistrates Court Sentencing Guidelines changes. God, man, that's a tongue twister, isn't it? Yeah. Changes the amount for relevant weekly income as follows on page 149. So this is obviously the internal document. Where an offender only source of income is state benefit, including where there is relatively low additional income as permitted by the benefit regulations, or the offender is in receipt of income from employment or is in self-employed, but the amount of income after deduction of tax and national insurance is £120 per week or less, the relevant weekly income is deemed to be £120. Where there is no information onto which a determination can be made, the court should proceed on the basis of an assumed relevant weekly income of 440. So I'm guessing that's not the national average. I suppose it would be if it includes all the rich people. This is derived from national median pre-tax earnings. A gross figure is used as, in the absence of financial information from offenders, it is not possible to calculate appropriate deductions. There you go.
So £440 a week then, Brad?
Well, that's the measure they're using.
Wow.
If they can't substantiate their income.
So that's the assumption. Wow.
See, this is a thing that I've not experienced. I mean, I was only in magistrates court last week. We just did the same old means test. But this comes into play as of, what did they say? 11th September. So when was the 11th? So, okay, so I may not have... Yeah, so 11th was last Friday. So I was in on... Oh, I was in on Friday. Was I in Friday? I can't... Whatever. Anyway, it doesn't really matter, but that's what it says.
Wow.
Interesting.
That's shocking, yeah.
Vin, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, mate. Don't worry. I'm just listening in a minute.
Jimmy?
Sorry?
Yeah, hey, mate, I'm here.
Yeah. Do you know much, just out of interest? Fabrice is probably going to kick my ass for asking this question, but anyway, I'll ask. Do you know much about Peter of England?
What's that? Sorry, man?
Do you know much about Peter of England?
We Rebank.
Peter?
No, We're Bank.
No.
Okay. Fabrice?
Yeah, I've looked into it just on a limited amount because
Have you signed up yet?
no, I can read. So yeah, and what I read wouldn't endear me to sign up because it's it didn't seem to balance in a way, if you have privileged relationships that can allow you to issue money, it's not part of a system that I want any part in, because it's a Ponzi scheme to effect, and I don't believe in privileged relationships in that way. I don't think that one group class of people should be treated in one way inherently than all their neighbours. As simple as that, really. So and I didn't look into it beyond that, really.
Yeah. What do you reckon, mate?
I'd like to jump in after Vin, if that's okay.
Sorry, mate.
What do you reckon about it?
This Peter of England fella, yeah, I've been following it since it's sort of hit a lot of the websites. I think he's been around about a year nearly now, maybe about 9 months or so. And yeah, I mean, he's obviously running a complete blatant scam, and that mob on the get out of debt free lot jumped all over it when it first come out. This is what these people are like. A new guru, it's the scene, and they're all over him like shit flies around shit. Sorry.
Yeah, what I was going to say is, guys, is that banking can be quite a dry old subject, and will obviously only take a certain amount of people's attention. What I urge everyone to do is to go on to Channel 4 OD on demand, and there's a thing there about the Bank of Dave, and it's very interesting. It's about a chap called Dave Fishwick up in football stadiums, Burnley, Dave from Burnley, and that's how he sells himself. I'm Dave. He's self-made, this guy. He's a multi-millionaire, got the stately home, the helicopter and everything, and he decided to set up his own local bank. Well, the Channel 4 programme goes through the trials and tribulations of him setting up his bank, and this is someone who's a multi-millionaire. I mean,
it's a good programme, actually.
Yeah, and we spoke about it before, Brad, haven't we? And if people are interested in having an insight into the world of banking, have a look at this guy that surrounds himself with the right people, with people that have been in the banking industry, trying, as Fabrice just referred to, trying to get into that cabal, trying to get into that group. Mm-hmm. And this is a guy that was able to fulfill all the various different assurities that you had to put up. He could afford the relevant insurances, and they would not grant him a banking license.
He even went to Parliament as well.
Yeah. And it just gives everyone, and as you alluded to, Fabrice, which is interesting, is that unless you're one of them, whoever them are, mm-hmm. You're not getting in. You are just not getting in. They are not going to allow you in. End of.
And it's interesting because a license is a permission slip to do something that would otherwise be illegal.
It's what we referred to the other night, and that's the thing, that conversation we had the other night that we'd all rather forget about.
I'm sorry about that, Fabrice.
Yeah, it's your fault, Brad. I still haven't recovered, but anyway, I'm still taking the medication. But it's just that everyone's got to realise when it comes to licences, as Fabrice has just alluded to, anything that you have to pay for has been outlawed, but then been allowed, subject to a payment being made.
Yeah, and that's that's an important. I think we had Gary Capps on last week, and he's really good at picking up and calling things by their proper name, and that with things such as a license, does that also the question again leads on, is that an implied threat? Because if I don't have a license to travel, known as a passport, should I wish to move from one place to another that is behind some arbitrary zone that they call a border, then I could find myself locked in a cage, or at least, physically probed, just for trying to, move from one place on this rock to another. and nobody asked my consent. But if I go out and get this piece of paper, then allegedly I can travel from one place to another. So, I mean, that's an interesting ethical point to bounce around with things such as licenses and passports.
I can hear the ping of plastic gloves, Fabrice.
Yeah, well, I think that's why I'm going to have to apply for another passport. Because if you don't, and I think that's the art of picking your fights as well. That's the nasty thing when people come, knocking it with things like traffic. If you lose, hopefully you won't lose your liberty.
Yeah.
With some things where your liberty is at stake, I hope that it's more as Bradley feels, that actually, some of the judges are magistrates, and I think as well at some levels, definitely at district judge levels, there seem to be quite a few people there who seem like they're doing their job as is written on the tin as best they can. But yet there's also some who have that steamroller revving up as well.
I mean, referring back to Jerry Spence, what's interesting, because he sort of grew up as a prosecutor and was in his 30s and was established as being a highly successful prosecutor in the state of, I think it was the state of Kansas, and was getting a reputation as being the man to get on your case. And obviously in government circles he was becoming a star. And literally to put his legal career on the line and say, no, can't do it anymore, I'm going to defence, which literally meant that he was putting his legal career on the line.
Yeah, well, also with that as well, he must have brought a certain amount of knowledge of
Yes.
prosecutorial strategy and prosecutorial methods, and that's why I know. Vin's done a few. I know Gary Capps has done a few of the role-playing groups where people rotate. So if they're going to court, they have a go as the prosecutor, they have a go as the magistrate or judge, so that they can see what it's like to be in that role and what their intentions are. And that can often give a much better understanding, I think, and often lessens the fear, I think, as well. And I don't know what Vin thinks, or what your experience of trying some of that is, Dean.
Well, I've never been involved in them, but I've listened to lots of Vin's calls with regards of doing the role play. And one thing I realised is that it's like I call Vin a legal ninja. It's ninjaing, because you're contorting and jumping from one position to the other, especially when you're swapping roles. And it's sort of left brain, right brain scenario where it's like you're trying to balance out the mind where you can get the position against and the position for. Which is a great balance, especially if you're stepping into the lion's den. But what's interesting is that Brad takes a completely different approach. Don't you, Brad?
Yeah, I mean, but approach is always changing. I mean, it's the principles are the same.
Yes.
But my approach on each case is always very different, and that's what makes what I do very time consuming.
Yeah.
And that's why our success rate is so huge, because of the fact that we're I've got a bit of pride in what we do, and all the people, as you well know, Dean, including yourself, do this stuff charitably.
Yeah.
So therefore, my personal opinion is I never want to let anybody down, and it is correct to say we lose cases, but I don't give up. And I will, and also I'll be open and honest with people and say, look, these are your risks. Do you want to proceed? And they either say yes or no, or we say no, we're not interested anyway. Because I get so much fucking shit, as you know, Dean.
Yeah, big time, man.
Yeah, which people contact me and just spout all sorts of crap. all the time.
Well,
No,
one of the things that I found that is useful, just like an equation, a rule of thumb, is that you can only help people as much as they want to help themselves. So if people are willing to give things a go, willing to understand exactly where it is that you're coming from, your strategy, your modus operandi, your mode of operation, then if they're willing to do that, then it can be worth your effort. But if they're not, some people I find almost want you to do it all for them.
No, we have that problem. However, I'm willing to bear that burden in some instances, because one thing that the way I started this, it's not just about going to court and dealing with legal issues. It's more about life skills. That's the biggest premise to it all. Yeah. Because I've met many people that ought not to be in this situation. I've met some of the most vulnerable people you can imagine, and it's extremely difficult to work with them. However, what the girls do in the background, and Dean's dealing with some of the men who are also extremely vulnerable, is we work on the life skills to basically ensure they don't end up in this situation again. And secondly, we're setting up people's lives. We're actually making a massive difference. I'll tell you what, we could make a movie.
I mean, that's an interesting thing, Brad, is the fact that when something happens in court, it's there, it's done. Save appeals and so on. And when the process is done, it's done. And that makes a big impact. Sometimes it could mean the difference between whether they get to see their child or not, whether their family is held together or not, whether they're able to put a roof over their head or not, whether they're able to keep their job or not, whether they're able to keep their mode of transport to get around or not, and that's that makes a big difference in real terms, in real life. And that's why I think any time that you do have, especially with, like I say, your hit rate and your positive attitude towards resolution in court.
But don't you reckon, man? Every time I come away from the Legal Land shows, I just get the impression that, knowing a lot about, the way the mafia works and, prohibition, gangstering, it's fucking racketeering. It really just follows the same old basic patterns as, like a protection scam.
Jimmy, you're spot on. That's who it is. It's Cosa Nostra. Yeah,
exactly. And, that's what the establishment represents.
That's all it is. It's F you, pay me. But I'm not working. F you, pay me.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I mean, and the hard part is when you have elements of the justice system like parking, traffic, so on, which do appear to be extortion rackets. Arbitrary penalties that are there. But the problem with that, Dean, is that sometimes people get robbed, people get mugged, people get injured, people get murdered, raped, and ripped off. So, and on some of those occasions, our justice system is supposedly the best recourse those people have to justice, and it kind of brings it into disrepute when you've got racketeering going on in the courtroom next door.
Yeah, but I mean,
and steamrollers.
Fab, don't you reckon that it's gotten so pathetic? It's gotten to the point where they've got, and I was thinking this when you guys were talking about automated letters. It's gotten so pathetic that actually they've got an algorithm to do the heavy work. Instead of having the big burly guy, now you've got a computer basically sending automated messages. That is, essentially, it's holding a gun against people's heads.
Oh, completely.
Well, it's also, a point that Brad made earlier about taking each case independently, because there isn't one size that fits all. There isn't, there may be the strategies, there may be things that can be transferable, but every single case has to be viewed on its own merits if you're going to deal with it at all, I think.
We had an interesting case, if I can just recount it, everybody. A woman called up Brad, and I think you was in the High Court, Brad, or you was coming or going or in between cases. and she was fluent in Freemanesque, where she was talking about, lots of different Freeman words she was coming.
Is that the one that was beginning with K?
Corinne, yeah.
Oh, right. Okay.
Just call her Corinne.
Okay.
And you passed her on to me, and then I subsequently started dealing with her, and she just come out, I don't know whether it was 8 or 12 weeks for non-payment of council tax. She actually done time. And her only crime was to ask for where the obligation was in regards to paying a council tax. And that one question had a multi-agency police raid on her home, where they came in armed. When I mean armed, I mean with guns. Yeah, they came in with guns. They threatened to shoot her dogs. Now, when they came in to raid the house, the officers that were there to deal with the dogs went behind the officers that walked in that were unprotected. So surprise, surprise, when they went into the house, the dogs, which are 2 German Shepherd type dogs, were obviously quite aggressive because there were men in outfits breaking into the home.
Dean, what do you reckon about this concept? What this sort of behaviour, what narrative does that reflect? It totally reflects, the whole concept of domestic terrorism.
Well, exactly. But the way I look at it is this way: is that the police. I'm not a police shield, so please don't people stop.
Yeah, you are. You fucking liar.
Yeah, no, I'm a liar. Okay.
Spotted you a mile away, mate.
Exactly, spotted me a mile away. Your full disclosure. I mean, the one thing is, Jimmy, when the police do a raid, they don't know what's behind that door. It could be anything from an old granny with a cup of tea. Come in, dear, and I'll sit down. I'll give you a cup of tea and a couple of cakes, and let's sort this out. To some sort of Al Qaeda, ISIS, booby-trapped house. Now, and anything else in between. So obviously, a lot of these officers that do these raids are adrenaline junkies. That's what they've got adrenaline coursing through their veins because they've been told when they have their meeting in the morning, when they obviously before they go and do the raid, these people are terrorists, and that's what they painted this woman as being. So when they bust into the house, and luckily it was all on camera, it was all documented. She was literally arrested for non-payment of a court fine, but it was a multi-agency raid. So the dogs were put into kennels, and she just literally, her resistance was just to sit and go limp. They handcuffed her, and they pulled her out of the house by her handcuffs, tearing all the ligaments out of her arm.
Can I just add something in there? Yeah, Dean, you're wholly right, and what happened to her was wrong.
Completely, yeah, it's, without any shadow of a doubt.
Under any circumstance, it was wrong.
Well, however, there's no need to deal with, there's no need to start issuing violence if there's no violence involved in any situation in the first place. It's ethically undefendable.
And the crime was, sorry, Brad, I know you want to jump in, but the crime, just to reiterate to everybody, was asking where her obligation was to pay council tax. That was it. That was the crime.
Yeah. Now, one thing, this is my biggest gripe, Fabrice and Jimmy, and Dean knows my biggest gripe in this regard, is these bloody websites which promoting non-payment of stuff, dodging this, going there, this works, this doesn't, write these letters. There's, for example, people are losing their homes just for questioning their mortgage and the validity of the mortgage. Just that. And they can lose their home. They can get, there's a condition in the standard terms of contract where you can get rid of it. Now, there's an interesting little story here, right? And I'm sorry to keep referring to Dean, but he's the only one that in our group that's here, is effectively, we've had cases where people have come to us, and effectively, let's use the scenario of 2 months down the line, we figured out actually all is not as to be seen, and we've been pissing around helping this person. Now, in this instance, I spoke to the lady. We did the usual phone call, which we record. Well, all my calls are recorded anyway. But then we sent it round, and I said to Dean, and in this instance, I think Dean was with Sandra. I can't quite remember. Anyway, and I said, look, this is not for us. It doesn't meet the ethical reasons. And she's talking all this free man crap. Because she ought not to have went to jail anyway, regardless.
Yeah.
However, Dean took it on his own accord.
Yeah, I did, yeah.
Which is great. And basically it's been working with her now, and I think it's turning into a success. I think.
Well, yeah, if I can just come to that. I mean, what I did was, I ran it by you, Brad, and you said, look, Dean, if
I said do what you want.
Yeah, you said fill your boots, so, and it was just saying about the woman. Anyway, it turns out that many years ago, she worked for 10 years in a solicitor's office. So she was dropping in legal words amongst all the Freeman rubbish. So, and it turned out that she's got a master's degree in the history of art. So she's quite a well-educated lady, which is obviously helps. So I spent hours and hours and hours with her on the phone. So literally I was giving her guidance, taking her through all the Freeman sovereignty thing, all the things she was coming, the policeman, one thing she said to me was, Dean, did you know when they came in and they arrested me, they didn't have their helmets on. So they weren't policemen. Because apparently, if you're arrested by a policeman who hasn't got his hat on, he's not a policeman. So even though she had her ligaments torn out of her arms, it was done by a man, not by a policeman. Anyway, to cut a long story short, she ended up doing 8 or 12 weeks inside, and that's when we started dealing with her. So obviously she was severely damaged, mentally, physically. She was horribly abused in prison.
They're not nice. They're not nice places.
80% of the time, Fabrice, she was in isolation. They isolated her in a cell.
That breaks people. Breaks people.
Fabrice, 23-hour day bang up.
Yeah.
This is council tax. Council tax. This is not Al Qaeda or ISIS. Yeah. So anyway. So she's come out, and of course I've got to cut all through that stuff. And, this is someone that's been horribly, horribly damaged. Her children, that she's got older daughters with grandchildren, a husband. Everyone's horribly upset. So what I've done is I put her on the path of going to the BK video site, taken her through the whole thing, because of course she's got to defend herself against she was obviously had another attack for non-payment of council tax.
Okay, yeah.
But because obviously they're not happy with taking 12 weeks of your life. Mm-hmm. They still want the money. So I had to take her through all that. And
Dean, sorry, I didn't know that. That's not how it works.
I know.
Basically, your time spent in prison.
It's time paid. It's paid.
Minus £65 a day for council.
Exactly. But anyway, what happened was the council found another period of time that she hadn't paid for that was separate to the prosecution that she got incarcerated for. So what she did was, her situation was that she was being off medically, not being able to work from a couple of serious medical conditions, and she was basically self-funded. And when I said to her, look, Karen, you've got to get sign on for disability benefit, she was dead against it, absolutely dead against it. Well, that took another 4 weeks for me to actually get into her head that, look, if you're going to deal with the system, you need to get benefits so you can get, you can get fee remission to defend yourself. And which is what she's done, which meant that the council tax was paid, which means now she's not going to be prosecuted for that.
Excellent.
So it's a whole chain reaction. But her position was, Dean, I don't want anything from them. And I said, well, look, I understand that, and I understand honourably you've been looking after yourself when you've been ill for nearly 15 years. But what you're doing is you're literally getting the gun and blowing your own feet off. You've got to go and get in. So literally within getting into the benefits system, they processed her in under 3 weeks. So she was covered, which was fantastic.
Excellent. I mean, I think that's really important. I mean, I know Brad mentioned it very briefly earlier, but it is one of those things as an individual, and every individual you work with, you can't effectively, if they're going to represent them, if they're going to be a litigant in person, you have to make sure, the front line is in their state of mind.
Yes.
Because if that state of mind, actually, if you're not physically capable of standing up and saying what you want to say when it's written down in front of you, then in some ways, there may be other options that are better for you. If you can be brave enough to look at what it is that's making that difficult and see if there are any strategies that can help, that when you do stand there, you are able to say clearly what you want to, then, that makes, like I said, the difference between the state steamrolling somebody, which they must do to come kick your doors in. Like I said, for where there's no violence involved, especially if they've got big scary tools that can shoot your beloved family pets. That's that's some kind of intimidation that's going on there.
Okay, here you go. Newspaper just literally just come up. Someone's emailed me it. 2 jailed in Flintshire for failing to pay council tax. Flintshire County Council is warning those who refuse to neglect to pay council tax they could be locked up, but say it's always a last resort. Bearing in mind, the word people should use if they're in this situation is knowingly and willfully not pay it. Right, now, anyway, I just want to give you this top headline section, because there's a big article here, really. Residents in Flintshire, I don't even know where the hell that is, are being warned they could end up in a prison cell if they fail to pay their council tax. More than 67,000 people in the country are liable for their tax. And although that can't be right. More than 67,000 people in the county, okay, fine, are liable for their tax. And although the majority pay their bills, the council say they're a couple. Who the fuck wrote this? Daily Post. Anyway, I think they're saying
they still do they say how many are outstanding?
Yeah, I think they're saying 10,000, but they've put it as 10 with another 0 and another 0. I think they mean
10,000. Yeah.
If I can just bring that story to the court case, Brad, because it refers to what you've just said. She's ended up going to court after doing her studies. She went through everything on BK videos. She listened and re-listened to the effective case management form, which she duly filled out and sent off. When the hearing was heard the week before last, basically, because of the effective case management form and the position that we put her in, and the educational stuff that's on Brad's site, she had them, and when I mean them, she had the clerk and she had the magistrates and the prosecutor all at each other's throats.
Which is one of the most effective ways to get a case dismissed.
Exactly, and when she basically the trial is set for, I think it's set for end of October, there or thereabouts. I've got it in my diary. So she said when she handed effective case management form to the prosecutor, she would wait outside for the form, and then they made her wait for half an hour, and the usher came out and said, "My God, that was a sight to be seen." And the usher said to her, How long have you been practicing law for?" And the usher, and she said, I don't. I'm just a litigant in person. She said, "Yeah, right. Yeah, okay, all right. Yeah, like F off." Anyway, then the prosecutors come out with the effective case management form, handed it to her. So she's flicked through it. The prosecutors tried to scuttle off. She said, "Excuse me, come back. You haven't signed this." So she's made the prosecutor sign the form, and the prosecutor sheepishly come back and sign the form. And the prosecutor said to her, "Are you a trained lawyer?"
Excellent. Excellent. I mean, that's one of the things I'm sure.
I didn't know that story.
Bradley.
Yeah,
Bradley
sorry,
gets
did
it.
I forget to tell you? Sorry.
I'm sure Bradley gets it too. Is that actually, if you're confident enough in your questions, it, they stand. The questions stand.
But what was interesting, though, sorry, cut in there, Fabrice. But what was interesting was she said this was a morning hearing that was penciled in for half an hour. She got in there at 9:30, and at 11:30, 11:45, the magistrates are twitching because they've got to go to lunch, because no one wants to drink a glass of warm Chardonnay. Come on,
of course.
Enough's enough, yeah? So the magistrates are getting very antsy, and it's starting to get very tetchy between the magistrates and the prosecutor. The clerk is in the middle trying to keep everybody calm. And she said, what was interesting, Dean, she said, I listened to what you said. She said, I sat back in my seat and folded my arms and watched them all eating each other.
Yeah.
She said the effective case management form was being passed around like pass the parcel.
Well, I can well imagine.
Fabrice has got a friend, Peter Gilbert. He had one case where and Fabrice would, it's an audio we did with Peter, where Peter said, and I really like Peter, and where he said the prosecutor was like waving it in the air in such distress. And basically, it was case dismissed. That was the second case. And on the first occasion, he went in, did exactly verbatim what we said. Yeah. Case dismissed.
I mean, he's following.
That was for his son, actually. His sons.
Yeah. And you follow the instructions that Bradley bounced to Peter. And it puts them in a hole to say how they're going to effectively move forward and manage with the case. So,
but Fabrice, she told me when she was in the hearing, is that from 9:30, 9:45 till nearly midday, at least 90% of that time, they were trying to bully her into submitting a plea.
And that's what happened to Peter.
Exactly, and time, and this is the same playbook for these people. And because she said, well, I would like to enter a plea when I have full disclosure and I can give a full and meaningful plea. But at the moment, until I get full disclosure to find the cause and nature of what I'm being charged with, I'm afraid I can't give you a meaningful plea. She said, if I said that once, Dean, I must have said it 30 times.
Yeah, and as I think Gary Capp said, if you ask the same question twice in court without responding to the answer that they're giving the meantime, they like to call that contempt. Yeah. Because it looks like you're ignoring the court and just proceeding and not ignoring. And when you ignore the court, they call that contemptuous when the court is in session. So.
But the shame of it is, though, Fabrice, if you flip this over, if she sat there and said, please can you supply, because obviously, to me, I think law is a toolkit. You can't just go in with a hammer. You've got to have a multiple of tools at your hands. You've got to.
That's a great analogy.
Because otherwise, if you go in with a hammer, all you can do is hammer things. And sometimes a hammer can't do the job. So sometimes you've got to be a little bit light on your toes and use their laws against them, because effective case management form, correct me if I'm Brad, it's CPR rule, blah, blah.
3, I think.
Yeah. And as you well know, Fabrice, if they veer or err from CPR rules, that leads to a whole world of hurt for them.
Yeah, well, it's because it's their rules, and if they've stipulated by, these are the rules, these are the procedures, and because of a challenge or a requirement that you have in responding to their alleged case, then to have that paperwork, that's why I agree with Brad when he says that as soon as you get that first letter, it's a good time to start your record of your engagement, so that at the earliest opportunity when you can ask for that disclosure, so that you can be informed of exactly what the cause and nature are. And I like I say, I know Gary Capps was really good in talking about the cause and nature, and I was going to ask Brad to clarify about the hook. You used a different term, I think, Brad, in terms of when you look at a case and you see where your leverage is.
Oh, you're holding. You mean
holding? Sorry, yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. It's effectively holding is one thing, and then when you're looking for research, you want to look down the annotated statute route. Going back to that form, it's CPR rules. I didn't want to interrupt you.
I've got it on my desktop here. Actually,
it's parts 1 and 3.
Parts 1 and 3. I've got it here on the desktop. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a really really useful tool to have.
One thing I find quite interesting, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dean.
Yeah.
Nobody else has ever talked about this before, have they?
What that case?
No, the actual form, because I'm happy to talk about this, right, Fabrice? I've got a.
We've spoken. I think we spoke a certain amount about it on one of the live video chats that we had, but in terms of how it's used to stipulate each party to their obligations and define the areas of contention, so that the case can be managed as effectively as possible, so that it can reach a speedy resolution, or it can be discharged if that's the case.
But what's interesting though, Fabrice, and they've done it to me in a pathetically in a traffic case I was involved in, is the cheeky buggers will write to you when you file the effective case management form with them and ask you who you want them to bring in against you. It's like, excuse me, I'd like a beating, please. But can you use the metal bar in
No. What you should have said is busty blonde. Can you go and get a busty blonde?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, great. Yeah, I'm a big fan of that. But
the other thing, Dean, is you want to be careful how you respond to that, because they may be under the impression that you're fit to practice law, and if they're asking you for legal advice of how to present their case, I think it's something that Vin almost came close to in the hearing that I was at with him, where the prosecutor again had that rabbit in the headlights look, when the judge asked, can you present your case, Miss Prosecutor? And she barely could, say what the offence was, when it occurred, and what happened, and took about 3 bites of the cherry. It's really quite odd to see in that way.
I tell you what was just ever so slightly awe-inspiring was.
Hey Jimmy, can you turn your mic up a little bit?
Yeah, just up a bit louder, please, Jimmy.
Is that better, guys?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah,
lovely.
yeah.
Sweet.
Glorious.
I was just saying that there was this slightly awe-inspiring moment when we had the QC on. What's his name? Alex.
Stephen K.
Oh, Stephen K. Sorry, not what's his name.
Yeah,
Stephen
that was
K.
a good show.
And it was really interesting. What really kind of got me was when Fabrice fielded a few questions his way, and it was the first time he'd even thought in that direction. It was quite interesting, wasn't it, Fabrice?
Yeah, I think we touched on it just a little bit earlier, that until some of those questions and points are put up before the bench, a large number of them I don't think have ever come across a cohesive, logical inquiry that doesn't have the sort of bar association threat of withdrawal of your membership and license to practice law if you question, as the lady you were talking about, Dean, if you question where the actual evidence and where the actual, factual proof of an obligation comes from.
Well, but as you know, Fabrice, if you're an officer of the court or similar, if you're a QC or whatever, why would you'd rather be in the tent peeing outwards because that's where your bread is buttered and your livelihood. Why would you want to come out with positions where you're outside the tent peeing in, where you're left out in the cold? Why would these people? And Jimmy, that's a perfectly valid, observation he made. But you've got to remember that these people, even though they're allegedly highly educated, which they are, they're highly educated. I mean, it's an advanced law degree. These people are not stupid. Why would they jeopardise their legal careers? Because at the end of the day, they're sending their kids to school, to nice schools. They've got a nice Swiss skiing chalet. They've got a nice weekend country home in the Cotswolds, and they live in a rather nice address in centre of London. Why would they start to unpick the paradigm?
That's it. The paradigm completely works in their favour.
Exactly, and that's the thing, Jimmy, is that how can we, as lay people, because we're outside the tent trying to pee in, aren't we? How can we be my favourite word, guys, discombobulated?
Can it not be a tent? Can we not say we're outside the mansion or something?
Outside the mansion, sorry.
That sounds more attractive to us.
Sorry, you're bad, but it's my bad. But, how can we be discombobulated by the position they take? Because at the end of the day, even though if we put different paradigms towards them, and as you just said, Fabrice, he was sort of knocked sideways by some of the questions because it's something that just, I guess, he'd never countenanced. And why would they? Because they don't need to.
This is the thing, right? Fabrice, right? Jimmy, sorry. That's twice I've done that to you now. Is what people don't understand as well. Ignore the QC thing because I'm sure that's probably a great episode. Sadly, I haven't listened to it, but I would like to.
No, it's very good. You should listen to it. It's very
but a lot of people, like for example, no, I'm not going to give an example. It is essentially what I find is a lot of people they claim to be studying law, but it's law which is quite archaic in many respects, and they're looking to apply that to the current day.
Yeah.
Now, there's so much crap that I've seen. Now, going back to the paperwork and the way that I operate, and it's only it's the way I operate.
If I can just interject for a mo, do you find one of the biggest ways in which lay people get confused when looking at the law is the confusion between what is a law or a statute and what is actually a fact?
Okay, this is the crux of it, right? Now, a lot of law that's applied by all these free-man people, all that sort of stuff, the get out debt free, the Veronica Chapmans, Dean can reel off the names better than I can. Doesn't have a clue, right? The issue is they're saying it's never been repealed, which is true.
It's true,
right? However, what they're working to is the statutes and acts. Now, common law does come into court, but I tell you what, every common law offence that I've come across in terms of court that we work on so far, I mean, it's not huge numbers, but I'd say it's probably, I'm going to say 24, but it may not be that many. Every single common law offence has been dropped where an accusation has been made by the CPS. Now, what people need to realise is that effectively they need to follow, let's just say in civil, well, and criminal, CPR rules, but it's two sets of different CPR rules. And also, and the easiest way to do it is go to the library, look up specifically cases that relate to your case or similar, and look at the annotated statutes. It's the easiest way to get nuts and bolts of what your defence is going to be. Really, really important. In family cases, it's the Red Book. But, the libraries, they're open, they're free of charge. I mean, most of it's on the web. Well, if not all of it's on the web in some way, shape or form. But going back to archaic law, archaic history, all that sort of stuff, what you need to focus on, and this is how people get easily distracted, is what will work today.
Yeah.
That's it.
That was it. Exactly.
And I guess in terms of where we started Legal Land on the bunker show, it's damage control. What works effectively.
Guys, I'm going to mute out for a bit, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to wind this up here for a recording.
Sorry, Fabrice, can I just make one last point with regards to old archaic laws? I'll be really quick.
Sure.
Because it's a real life scenario. My dad's a black cab driver, 45 years. Yeah, he drives a Hackney carriage, a black cab in London. The law has not been repealed that you must keep a bale of hay in your cab. Right?
Yeah.
It's still live and it's still on statute. Now, me and you, Fabrice, it's our first day on the job as a couple of PCs, and we see a cab driver and he hasn't got a bale of hay in his cab. So we're desperate for our first nick, Fabrice, aren't we?
Well, apparently an arrest is worth, I think somewhere between 10 and 30 points of the 300 points that a police officer will have to get each month to make sure they hit their efficiency targets.
Exactly. So do we go over to the cab driver and then arrest him for not having a bale of hay? Because obviously that statute was brought in when it was horse and carriage. It's technically, it still fits to the remit of the law. Well, it's not technical, it does fit to the remit of the law. We drag him into the station, we take him in to be booked into the sergeant at the desk. What's the sergeant going to say to me and you, Fabrice?
It's not in the public interest, you prats, let him go.
Yeah, you blood. Yeah, exactly. So, the fact is that me and you could go to the bunker underneath the Houses of Parliament where they keep the rolls. And by the way, I've been down there and it's a fascinating place. It really is fascinating. Where we can bring out all these scrolled parchments of all these previous laws that do not relate to present day. Yes, they're the foundation of law, but they have no relation in the modern day paradigm. So why would you go into court citing the SES-KV Act of 1660?
Sister K Act.
Pardon me, Vin. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, yeah.
I mean, what relevance has that got to today? We won't even go there. How the law applies to you in the first place.
Well, what relevance does there's a lot of it have in terms of a bunch of dead guys writing something on a piece of paper who had absolutely nothing to do with me, and exactly. That's a very strong foundation from which to come from. Just looking at the empirical proof and understanding the law as you said, Dean, as the toolkit by which controversies are allegedly resolved, as opposed to what we sometimes come across, which seems like a cunningly disguised extortion racket.
But exactly, Fabrice. It's the equivalent of starting your first day at work if you're doing an administrative job and walking in with a quill pen and a pot of ink. You're going to be laughed out of the place. It's got as much relevance. It's got no relevance whatsoever. But people, because it's law, and as you say, it's just a bunch of old guys, dead guys that put, things down on a piece of paper. But it's foundational in the history of where we are today with statutes and acts that are forced upon us, because they are forced upon us. We have no.
Well, that's for sure. And I mean, you make the point in terms of force. 500 odd years ago, if we'd broken ecclesiastical law, they could burn us, torture us. They had the power, they had the guns, they had the Inquisition that could do that. But today, you still have the same mechanism making ecclesiastical law. Yeah. They still have parliaments. They call them synods, or conclaves.
The Lamb of Palace. Yeah.
So factually, factually, they go through the same process
Yes.
as so-called Crown law. It's just that apparently the Crown has the guns and the rape cages and the tasers and the dog killing pistols to enforce that, whereas the Catholic Church haven't burnt anybody or drowned anybody or drawn and quartered them for a little while. In fact, we look back at that part of history as quite a barbaric time. Wow. And, who's to say that 20, 30, 40 years down the road, we might look back at this type of Crown estate legislation, Crown Corporation legislation system and the force that's behind it, in the same way we look back at the church law as a very archaic thing.
Well, these guys, as far as I'm concerned, these guys are just bucking like a very basic natural principle of evolution. Like they just don't roll with the flow. They don't with the tide. It's in their interests to play the game their way constantly.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean that's something about when we talk about these old ancient silly laws and stuff. I mean, it's not the facts that just because like the one you was talking about, the bale of hay in the back of the cab. It's only a copper's willingness to pull over a cabbie, open up his boot, and then say, right, that's it, I'm slapping you in handcuffs, you're nicked. Yeah. It's only that copper's willingness to act upon that, act upon that opinion, that written opinion called a statute, that gives it any type of gives it that false, of course, that makes it relevant in that respect.
Well, apparently, Vin, he's meant to use his discretion, and that's one thing that a lot of officers do not use.
Oh, that's been taken away from them, because of the targets they've got to hit. But I mean, one particular silly law I just wanted to mention when you were talking about the Houses of Parliament and all that is, do you know that there's a statute that was passed, God knows how many hundred years ago, but there was a statute that was passed that said that nobody is allowed to die in the Houses of Parliament. Serious, it's illegal to die in the Houses of Parliament because if you do, you'd be subject to a state funeral, and they don't pay for one of those. Serious, there's a law against it. This
interesting.
It's interesting. I think there's quite a few that are dead from the neck up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do they need to do on the spot? Are you still alive tests, or just have a couple of security there to taser them and make sure that they're still going?
Can you imagine at the House of Lords, Fabrice? They must have some sort of poking stick to see if they're still breathing,
or a cross to see if they're vampires.
Oh, I mean, I say.
You can imagine how quickly the medics would get there if something like that did happen.
But this is a worrying thing: is that people again are desperate to use my analogy of the guy that got in the bear enclosure and lost his arm. Is that these gurus will stand at the sidelines and say, "Go on, get in the bear." I got in there last week; it was fine. The bear never touched me. It was absolutely fine. And then the guy comes back without his arm, and they said, "Oh dear, you approached him the wrong way. I didn't approach him that way." But you've lost your house, you've lost your car, and you lost your liberty. Yeah, but you didn't do it the way that I did.
Yeah, I think it's very easy for people to.
What the gurus are doing is watching what you do and saying, "I'm never going to do it that way."
Yeah, exactly. And this.
It's always great, if hindsight was so brilliant, it would be foresight, and that often is, it is the way. And sometimes, you are on the occasions where you're doing things as best you can, because, as Brad said, every case is very, very different. But the thing with that is basically if somebody promises you a result in court, they're a liar, because it's court. You never know what's going to happen.
Caveat emptor: as you step in there, it's buyer beware. And when I mean buyer, I mean you are paying for that case one way or the other, whether you pay the fee or whether you're paying with your time, loss of labour, caveat emptor: as you step in there, buyer beware. You have, there's no such thing as a sure thing. I've seen cases go, Vin, and you were involved in one the cannabis one that you were involved in, Vin. These people will bear down on you and will threaten you. They will call you names. They will do whatever they can to try and rock you out of your position. and it's no holds barred. Eye gouging is allowed in the ring.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's one of these things where you think they would be on their best behaviour in certain courts, and maybe in the High Court that's true.
Oh, they are, Vin. They are
certainly in the Crown Courts and the Magistrates' Courts couldn't care less. I mean, we were talking about this with someone earlier today, but Magistrates' Courts, they couldn't care less what they say. I mean, I've had them pretty much point blank to me saying we are not going to give you a fair hearing. I've pretty much had that happen to me. And
what's your position, you two, with regards if you go to a magistrate's court? Because obviously it's not a court of record, and there's no record to be made on what's said. What would you, Fabrice? You've been in the den of iniquity enough times. What would be your advice when you're walking into an arena of a court where there is no record being made?
Have same as Bradley's. Have people with you who can make notes.
Notes, right.
If you can, it's always good to have media representatives there, even if they're just citizen journalists. And it's always good to have a couple of members of the public there as well, so that they can back that up, as it were.
Yeah. Just quickly, what happens if you oopsies leave your phone on record? Is that naughty?
If you accidentally do it, it's just one of those things, and these things happen. But
the problem is, Jimmy, is they're very wise to it now. So it's a £5,000 fine, and it's an imprisonable offence. So they desperately do not want you to have any sort of record whatsoever, and that's obviously a very big indication on the way the game is played. But one thing I would say to people is a bit of advice I got years ago is that there's a free website, everybody, called Bailey, the British and Irish Legal Institute. Just type in Bailey into Google, Bailey and then law, and it's a free website where you can go into the UK jurisdiction and you can read up on cases. And what's interesting with Bailey is you can read summaries of the case. So regarding what your issue is, so you can be aware of the framework and the parameters that your case should go along. Now, obviously, this is.
I'm back now.
Oh, you're back. This is Crown Court and above. This wouldn't be a magistrate's court, but Bailey will give you a good indication onto how your case could play out.
Yeah, Bailey's very good, actually.
Yeah, it's a very good resource, and I would say to people, if they do want to go a little bit deeper, if you go to your local library and ask for access to the Westlaw database, and Westlaw database is similar to Bailey, but far deeper, far more expansive. Vin, me and you have done a few hours in the library, didn't we?
Yeah, I've used Westlaw quite a few times, and the other one is LexisNexis as well. Sometimes you tend to find that the larger libraries, like big, the ones that are in the big cities and big towns and all that, they tend to have LexisNexis as well, which actually I find better than Westlaw.
So I would urge people that are listening to this, if they do your research, try and understand what the issues of your case are in relation to how it relates to the law as is.
See, I think the thing is if you're somebody who's coming new into this and you're going to study the subject, so then maybe start passing it on to other people and things like that. The most important, it's a skill set you have to learn.
Yeah,
that's the thing. So I keep saying this all the time. It's about learning about critical thinking skills and learning how to think for yourself. So it's all well and good reading laws, and reading case law, but all you're doing is you're reading someone else's religion, in the sense of you're reading their interpretation of reality, how they think the world works.
But the problem is, Vin, it's backed by a gun.
Yeah, obviously. But does that make it,
No, it doesn't make it right. But what I'm saying is that what I've learned with a lot of the cases I've been involved with, even though, Brad, I tell you, I was dealing with a case the other day. Guys had to pay up on £5,500 worth of congestion charge tickets, and he's got another £5,500 to come.
No. Well, I worked it out. almost 20 grand.
You're joking, Brad, really?
Just under 20.
Congestion charge tickets. Oh,
Yeah.
good on him. How did he manage that?
Oh, don't. But I'm helping the guy out, and I want to vomit. I mean.
Well, what's he done? Has he been
Well, no,
pulling all the free man stuff?
Yeah, he's got on get out of debt free, and the free letter system worked a treat.
And when he asked for some help, they all ignored him.
They blanked him.
Yeah.
Poor bloke.
Yeah.
I suppose he used it, and they all promised, oh yeah, it'd work like Colon does. He says it every time. Yes, the free letter process works.
Apparently, when he sent the letters in, it was the wrong sort of paper.
Oh, was that what I told him?
Yeah, if it had been a different sort of paper, it would have worked.
Should have been bonded and had a stamp on it. And
yeah.
It needs a fingerprint on it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and the fingerprint was the wrong one.
And feces and all that. Yeah, just
Actually, Vin, on that point, don't mention the name anyway. But you sent Dean. Sorry, is it Dean or Sandra? I think Sandra a case recently. Do you remember regarding the planning issue?
Yeah.
On that one, that guy was sending letters with a 5p stamp on and a thumbprint.
Yeah, I saw them. Yeah,
that's not impressive, is it?
Was that Carl Lentz stuff?
He was Carl Lentz, basically. Yeah,
he did mention to me some of the stuff that he started listening to was Carl Lentz on that.
Yeah. It was when Sandra. It's really funny actually because Sandra's never seen any paperwork like that. She's saying, "I've got this paperwork here. I haven't a clue what it means." And I said, "Read it out to me."
Yeah, there's so much of it. I couldn't copy it. I couldn't copy it. There was too much of it. So yeah.
Is Carl Lentz's simple letters right? And she's reading it out to me. She said, "But it makes no sense to me." She said, and we she read out the other one. She read out the next one. There's about this. Obviously, this guy's he's gone down different paths, just trying to resolve the issue. Unfortunately, he just chose the wrong path. However, the case was actually quite simple, but needs a little bit of mediation. But Sandra being a layman, imagine her being behind the counter and at a desk, reading these letters. She's going to be thinking, "What the fuck?"
It's really, I think that's one of the important things with paperwork is to make sure that actually, as a lay person, as often magistrates are, if they're going to see some paperwork, you want it to be able to be clear and legible so that somebody can understand it within a few moments, so that you can hopefully get to some kind of speedy resolution in your case. And some of the paperwork that people do put forward just has way too much, and I think that's why, as you mentioned, the skeleton argument in a magistrate's court, which I think is a great idea in terms of a synopsis.
That is a good idea, actually, a very good idea.
Highly recommend it. But look, Fabrice, right? Sandra's not thick, yeah. Now, Carl Lentz's principle is that he's an idiot, and let's keep it simple, yeah? Now, if you look at that in the polar opposite and reversing it, that's basically saying Sandra's thick.
Brad, if I can just say, sorry for Fabrice, that Brad's helping someone out, and we won't mention his name, Brad, where it's a debt obligation that's now gone to a debt collector that's now suing the chap. And the chap used the Carl Lentz process, and he sent in a photocopy of his hand. and I was chatting to the chap, and I said, "Well, to be honest, what would have been more effective is sending a photocopy of your arse."
Which one's this, Dean? Just tell me the first initial.
Well, we speak.
Send them photos all day.
We speak to him all the time, Brad. Oh, he's working at the moment.
Oh yes, sorry, yeah. Okay, so, yeah. I know you're on about now.
And the poor chap's highly embarrassed about it, and he's come on leaps and bounds, Brad, isn't he?
He's lovely. He is. Yeah.
He's a lovely, fantastic fella. What a fantastic bloke! But seriously, a 3-line response with a photocopy of his hand.
Yeah, I mean it won't help people take the questions that you're asking seriously. That's that's for sure. And it can be really upsetting when you have people who've are in a difficult situation, and it's just been made a hell of a lot more difficult. Even more so if it can really affect their life and liberty.
Well, I would have thought a nice photocopy of your backside would have been far more effective.
Maybe send some flowers and champagne. I'm sorry, that's terrible.
Oh, don't!
Yeah, but it's
don't say that.
They seem to have been reading, these gurus seem to have been reading books from the 14th and 15th century or something, and still think this stuff applies. This, in this day and age, it's like people used to put thumbprints on stuff, and the old wax seals and all this sort of thing. Back in the days when they never had, laptops and printers and things like that, So today, none of that stuff really matters anymore. You don't need to prove who you are in the sense of sticking thumbprints on things, because we're living in a modern age where being able to establish who someone is pretty damn simple now. Whereas 500 years ago, maybe that wasn't the case.
I was talking to a chap the other day, Vin, an old mate of yours, has followed the habeas process.
Oh God!
And that's really ingenious, because what you do is you
pay him a load of money.
Pay him a load of money, allegedly, and cut and paste lots of text out of post-medieval books, and learn it verbatim. And then what happens is when you get rejected by the magistrates, you then take it to Crown. Then when you get rejected there from Crown, you take it to, is it the General Synod? You appeal to the Archbishop. Apparently, after the magistrates, you can go straight to the Archbishop. And apparently, then you find all your way through to Europe. Well, on this appeal, eventually, you've been divested of between 7 and 9 grand. And you've got a load of appeals that have actually gone nowhere.
Yeah. It's unbelievable. I can't believe that bloke's still in business if he's still about pulling these tricks. I haven't heard a lot from him or a lot about him. People saying much about him. But
I mean, if I can just chuck a spanner in the works, guys, has anyone got an idea how we can stop this Freeman rubbish spreading like a virus?
It'll burn itself out. I mean, pretty much the Get Out of Debt Free website has took a battering now, especially these idiots over the Crawford Gate.
Really,
well,
it's going to burn itself out.
For me, I think the best way is making it as accessible, engaging as possible, refining it as much as possible so that it's as effective as it can be for the people who really need it. And hopefully if people can do that, they'll find the options that suit them better if they're in a position where they've got to look out for themselves.
Yeah, on that note, I was going to say as well, if we are going to put this up as an extract at some point, where do people go who are listening to this and have debt issues and need to, where should they start? You've got resources out there, haven't you? And I just thought it'd be good to chuck that in.
That's a good question, Helen. Brad?
There's a book that I've just come across recently. Give me a sec. Let's dig it out a minute. Here it is. It's called The Debt Collecting Merry-Go-Round by Anthony Reeves. It's out there in a second edition. Got writ last year. It's only a small book. It's only about 150, 200 pages or so, but it's a very good book regarding how to deal with debt collectors and when they start getting out of hand. And
Could you repeat that again, Vin? The name?
Yeah, it's called The Debt Collecting Merry-Go-Round by Anthony Reeves. That's Reeves with 2 E's, V-E-S.
Just googling it now, Vin.
Yeah, set out in second edition. So yeah, Google that, and I think it's probably about, I don't know, tenner or so.
Right.
Yeah, it's a tenner.
So
for a tenner, you've got. So I haven't got to read all of it yet. I've only just recently picked it up from our library. Funny enough, I mean, it could be at your local library. You never know, but that's a good little book worth having a look at.
Yeah, it's on Amazon. Vin just got it up now. How to Deal with Harassment from Debt Collectors by Anthony Reeves. It's on Amazon. It's just coming up now.
Hopefully we can stick a link up on the, when we post it on the show for YouTube.
Yeah, it's top listing. It's easy to find on Google. Just put in debt collecting
cool.
and it comes up immediately.
And I think like Brad's advice earlier is with not to ignore paperwork. And I guess I'd like to add to that is, communicate with people. If you have got debts, don't leave it to suffer. Don't let the pressure build up for you and your situation.
Yeah, I think it's wise to learn what the limitations of what debt collectors can and can't do. Obviously, a lot of them that come after you for these smaller debts, and especially when it does get passed over to a lot of these debt collection agencies, they don't actually have the power to actually enforce a lot of these debts against you. So, I mean, at the end of the day, if you genuinely owe the money for a justified reason, then yeah, you should pay it back and just offer what you can afford to pay, or whenever you can afford to pay it. I mean, obviously, just try and get these situations under control as best as possible. There's no point burying your head in the sand, but obviously, debt collectors do so-called, break the law, if you like, and they go against the rules and regulations they're meant to stick to enforce these things against you. So it's a matter of, being aware of that and understanding the limitations of what bailiffs and that can and can't do as well. So, yeah, I mean, get yourself educated in the sense of, go to some credible sources. Don't go to websites such as Get Out of Debt Free or, all these other...
Well, they're not here at the moment. They're not here at the moment to rebut what they do, and they're more than welcome to get in touch and have the opportunity to do that if we're mistaken in what you're saying there.
Well, as I said the other day, Fabrice, pardon me for jumping in, but I did say this to you the other night, that it would be important to get these people on to see where they're coming from, because I think it's important we all try and find, get a coherent, it seems to be that a lot of them, the first thing they want, because they're led by people that have got the approach of a 9-year-old boy, and Brad knows who I'm talking about, especially after the phone call they had, is that immediately they start calling you a shill or a government agent, or, that seems to be their position immediately. And what would be nice is to get someone on from that website to say, well, look, and give their side of things.
Yeah, that would be that. Yeah, that definitely that would be great, because the more the more clarity people have, the more understanding, hopefully the more they can deal with those kind of situations. And the other thing is as you mentioned, bailiffs overextending their authority is the ways and means of recording that, if they are. I recently watched I think it was a Panorama program, and they had an undercover reporter, and some of the things that he recorded from the bailiff sounded very much like a mafia protection racket. Yeah. In terms of their approach to dealing with some very vulnerable people who are obviously under financial pressure. So, I think that if people can get the support to record bailiffs or record telephone conversations that they have with bailiffs, so that they can make sure they're behaving in the ways that really they should do. I mean, do any of you guys have any thoughts on that before we close?
Well, I'll jump in again there, guys. Sorry. I had a bad experience on my wife's parking ticket that I appealed against at Northampton, and I got the ticket set aside to be represented for the notice to owner. Got a bailiff's letter. The following day they turned up. I went to work, come back home to pick up a file that I needed for work. These man and a woman pounced on me, asked me, was my wife's first name is Alison? And with the greatest stretch of imagination in the world, I don't look like an Alison. And obviously I said, well, it's not me, that's the debtor, she's at work, can I get her to give you a call? Next thing they did is they trespassed on my land, and I said, please, will you go? I've got this all on film, it's all on film, yeah? They refused to go. I called the police. The police arrived eventually. 2 WPCs turned up, and I said, can you ask these 2 bailiffs to get off my land? The bailiffs were going to remove goods on my land, garden furniture, etc., etc. And the two police women said to me this. They said, now I'm 6'3" and 16.5 stone, yeah? So I'm not a little guy. The two 4'1" police women said to me, "Sir, if you prevent the bailiffs from removing goods from your land, we will arrest you."
Interesting.
Which I've got on camera with them accepting that the warrant was not in my name because I don't look like an Allison.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing that you do want to have on camera because it's, as I understand it, if you have an excessive amount of that kind of behaviour, that builds up into, not being treated fairly when.
We've done some investigating, myself and Brad kindly traced the bailiff for me. They were based at Brighton County Court. Well, I'm up in Buckinghamshire. So the greatest will in the world, those two bailiffs drove in morning traffic, I reckon 2 to 2.5 hours. So the agenda was, Fabrice, it doesn't matter what was going to happen, they were going to come away with some money that day. They saw the house, they thought ka-ching, we're in for a good one here, and that's what they did. And they literally played the two police officers with absolute. They got the two police officers on side immediately. And by the way, Fabrice, as you well know, police officers shouldn't be involved in a civil issue.
Especially not at the moment with the latest legislation that really does impact their liability for the way they behave in civil disputes.
They're not allowed to do these. Sorry, Bruce. Just want to mention that they're not allowed to do these these traffic stops anymore. Where they'll set up
That's because of the outcry of Vin on that show, wasn't it, on the BBC show?
But they're still actually playing. I don't know what TV you may be getting, but only just recently they started playing those shows again. Where a lot of it's based in Croydon, isn't it? Croydon and Crawley.
That's it.
And the police are putting up these roadblocks and stopping people, and then getting the bailiffs to start having people's cars and that off them, saying that they're owed money and that, and they'll have their car off from there and then on the road. But the thing is, you watch these cases and you watch people start arguing with them, and what people don't realise is you can just get in that car and drive off. If the police haven't got any reason to hold you there under any sort of criminal or traffic offence, then.
Well, the chap,
irrespective of whether you owe money to that bailiff or not, they cannot hold you there. Just get in the car and walk off. If they say, "Well, you've got to pay us, or we're going to have the car," say, "Well, wouldn't you say a word to them? I just get in the car and drive away."
Well, Vin, the chap with the £5,500 TfL tickets for London congestion charge got caught in London by an APNR van. One of these vans with a corner on it, with a camera on every corner. Mm-hmm. What they did was they made an aggressive manoeuvre. And cornered him in a side street.
Yeah.
Then they got out and then chained the side of the door down. He called the police. There was a confrontation between them in the street where he wasn't going to hand over any money. The police officer got involved and said to the chap, "Hand me your key." And he said, "Why?" He said, "That's an order. Give me your key." And he gave the van key to the bailiff.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
Brad, do you have any thoughts on the appropriateness of filming bailiffs when they're doing their work? He's not there at the moment. The other one I wanted to ask you about just briefly before we shut down, if you can give us a minute of your thoughts, is recording in magistrates' court. Because we were talking a little bit earlier. Because there's the possibility, I know people are looking into whether you can send a request or an application, should I say, to a magistrate's court to record the proceedings. So that would be an interesting thing for transparency. I just wondered if you guys had any thoughts on that.
Or do you know anyone that's been successful for Bruce?
I don't think anyone's really done it yet.
No.
I don't think anyone's actually put through any paperwork to try and actually make that happen yet. So I think that's something we definitely need to work on in the very, very near future. You know, any case that's going to be coming up, or a case that we may be helping someone with, if they agree to it, let's put through some paperwork and see if we can actually get them to agree.
Is it a CPR rule, guys, or is it discretionary? Because if it's discretionary, it's not going to happen.
There is something written in one of the court rules, some act or statute, where it says that you can record or you can ask permission to record, but the recording cannot be used in part. If it's going to be played or made public, it must be made public in its entirety. And not in parts, you know, so you can't chop it up and the bits that you want and then just put on, you know, just make stick on YouTube, you know, the bits you want. I mean, that's obviously a rule or you know, a whatever that's been written into an old statute for quite a long time now. So that's probably written before, you know, the internet really took off and this sort of thing became such commonplace. But, you know, there's an opportunity for us to try and exploit it. But the thing is, you know what will happen? The moment we do ask for permission to record, they're going to assume that we're going to go in there recording anyway. And the moment you turn up at court that day, they're going to pull everybody's gear apart.
We will.
That's going to happen.
No, I'm just Googled it now. If it's discretionary, I would say it's always going to be a no.
Yeah. But even if they say no, if we put these forms in and they say no, which 9 times out of 10 they're probably going to do,
anyway.
Then it's going to be a matter of them. Then the moment we walk in there anyway, just because we've asked, they're going to suspect we're doing it anyway.
Well, there'll be extra security.
They're just going to pull your bits apart. Security going to be put on alert, and even when you get into the courtroom, they're going to start saying, are you recording and what you're up to, this, that and the other, and they'll be watching you like hawks and trying to use any excuse to try and nick someone to claim they're recording. So that's the problem it's going to cause, because the moment we say we want to record or we want to ask permission to record, that's going to get their paranoia levels going up through the roof.
Well, I'll tell you what, Vin, I'm gonna another little tip for people, if and this is a bit embarrassing, but I'm gonna full disclosure here. For £9.95p a month, I pay a subscription to DAS, which is an insurance company that have got a product called Instant Law. And instead of me spending dozens and dozens of hours researching stuff, I just pick up the phone and call them and ask them the question. And they've got offices full of paralegals and obviously got solicitors there if it's a little bit more technical. Well, normally I can get an answer within 15 minutes because I'm a lazy so-and-so.
That's a good idea, mate.
Well, you know,
that's a good resource.
You know, as you know, Vin, I'm always in and out of London, and I have to do everything mobile, and it's worth you know a couple of 2 or 3 cups of quality coffee a month, just so I can get to the nub of things and get it verbatim, which is, so I would say to people, if they've got legal issues on hand and they've got a lot of research to do, for the sake of, less than a tenner, and I know if money's tight for people, if there's anything else that they can cut back on, maybe their Sky subscription or whatever, I would respectfully suggest it's probably money well spent, because there are a few companies out there, including the Which organisation as well, do a similar product. So there are companies out there that will sort of give you guidance very, very quickly. So it's a useful little research tool, I find, anyway. So I will be putting that call in tomorrow.
Nice one. That's brilliant. I'm just about to wind up here, so just like to say thanks, guys, for joining us for a bit of extra in the bunker show. More than makes up for the technical glitches that we had a little earlier getting Dean on.
Everyone's regretting it now, Fabrice. Sorry about that.